do music because of the experience I get. So I'd learn the shit out of the tracks, walk in, plug in with my sound right, play it, and blow them out. I think to be a working musician, especially in Sydney, you have to do a whole bunch of things.
In partnership with Australian Institute of Music and Hunting with Pixels.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us. In this episode, we catch up with Peter Northcote, who's arguably one of the most recorded session guitarists in Australian history. He gives us a great insight into what it's like to be a working session musician and the kinds of things you need to do to have a sustainable career in the music industry. Check it out.
Thanks for coming, Pete. Really wanted to take the opportunity to chat with you. You're definitely one of the most respected musicians, and certainly I'm a fan of everything you do. So I really appreciate you coming in to talk to us.
Thanks, Dale, my pleasure.
All right. I kind of consider you to be like the Swiss Army knife of the musical world.
You've said that before, that's
yeah,
true.
and I love it. And there's no terrain you can't go. So tell us, for the people who might not know completely, what's the sort of the main areas of music you're involved in?
Okay, so it's a hard question, that, because I do a whole bunch of different things, and I think to be a working musician in this environment, especially in Sydney, because it's so tiny, you have to do a whole bunch of things. So I have a recording studio, and that's probably my main income. So I have a recording studio, I play live, I do a bit of tutoring and lecturing, and I write a lot of music. So I cover a whole bunch of areas, and I think to be a musician you have to do all that. The studio is really good for me because I get to do some radio and TV commercials. I do a couple of TV shows, like play the guitar and write some of the music for them. And then I also produce singer-songwriters. And it also gives me an opportunity to write my own material. So at the moment I'm about 13 tracks into an album. So
Fantastic.
So I've been there for about 13 years, and it's my cubby house, and it's my creative space. The live gigs are really important to me. I mean, I love playing live, and I'll say yes to everything because I just love playing.
Sure.
The tutoring is not so common for me these days. You know, I do one-off lessons. I don't do regular lessons because I just don't have time. I'm so busy doing so many other things. But yeah, that's what I do. You know, I mean, it's a different sort of thing these days because we have to, do promo ourselves and do photos and posters and any sort of production to keep all the things afloat.
Keep the juggling act.
Yeah, that's it.
So let's talk a little bit about, because I know a lot of the students and people watching who want to know about the session side of things. So let's just walk me through what a typical session might be. So,
well, again, that's changed too. I mean, here we are in 2013, and I started doing sessions in 1985. So, in those days, it was all on tape, and it was all live bands. Okay. You know, it's very rare to even see a computer, and if you did, it might have been a Commodore 64 running Dr. T that could do one note at a time.
Sure.
So sessions in those days, and I guess from about 1990 to about 2000 and early, I was doing sometimes up to 5 to 10 sessions a day. And that was, radio and TV commercials, people's albums, and demos, anything that was musical, So a typical session in those days was you would roll up to the studio and you would set your gear up, and you would have all the other musicians ready to get their sound together, and then we'd look at the chart and we'd play. It got to the stage where I was so busy that I had a full-time employee for about 5 years who would lug my gear around from one session to the other. So I'd be doing one session, he'd be setting up another one, and I'd go to that one, and he'd come and pack that one up and take it to the next one. So it was a really busy time. It was a fantastic time too. It's changed a lot now. I think we have, in the jingle scene, we have a lot more people that do everything. So a jingle producer might write, record guitars, basses, if they use them at all, and sing on them as well. So it's become a bit more of a one-stop shop. For me, a typical session is rolling up to a studio, and the producer has done a track and needs me either to replace guitars or put guitars on them.
Sure.
Now, it's very rare that I get given a chart, although some people still do, and that's kind of handy. But I'm not a great reader, so it doesn't really matter that much.
I think you're a great reader, but thank you.
Yeah, well, I get by, but I'm not like a great sight reader.
Sure.
I'm better off hearing things and
Yeah.
doing it. But I think, to be a session musician these days, I don't know, I think it's just, it's morphed into something different. And, I know that some people call session guitarists people that get onto a live gig and tour with a band, and that's become a session.
Right.
See, for me, it's never been that, that's just a live gig. So session tag has changed and morphed into something different.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So how much of the old process, so when you started playing with the advent of computers, multiple takes is something that's really easy to do now, and so almost makes the performances a bit throwaway to a degree. So one of the things I love about your playing is you're so precise and clean, and like one take is it. And you were talking about going from one session to another session. How much of that formative part of your career made you a better player because you had to be?
Unbelievable, because in those days you had to, you couldn't keep people waiting.
Yeah, right.
It was learn the part, play it properly, and that was it. No drop. Very rarely you would drop in. Unless the take was fantastic, there was one little mistake we'd fix. But it was all about getting the part right. So it's interesting. When I go into a studio now, and somebody else is engineering, I still have that mentality.
Yeah.
Now I may not get it the first go, but I can, I can get it the second or the third go. I remember working with Chad Wackerman, the drummer, and he used to share the studio with me, and he did a whole 16 tracks of one of my albums, one of my library albums, and it was hefty stuff, rock fusion sort of stuff. What he would do is he would listen to my demo and sit there with the chart and make marks, and then go in and play it. Now, if he didn't get it in the first take, which is very rare, he'd get it in the second. But there was maybe one track that he got in the third take, and he said, if I don't get in the third take, that's it. So he never did more than 3 takes.
Okay.
And all the energy was there. So I kind of have that mentality still. What's interesting is when I go into a studio, I have that mentality, but when I do my own stuff, I become so pedantic that I'm stopping and doing again and doing it again and doing it again. And I think that's partly because my mind is split between playing and performing and engineering and listening.
Sure.
But that was a great, let's just say, great formative, time for me to be able to learn how to play well first off. I see guys now, and it's around, but it's a bit more loose, because we can drop that bit in, and even with the producers that I work with, look, well, let's just do this part, and then we'll do this part, and then we'll do this part, and then I'll put it together. And we'll copy that from the verse to the verse, and the chorus to the chorus.
Right.
See, for me, when I do, I do doing tracks at my studio all the time, and I still want to play every verse separately, and every chorus separately, because they all feel different. And you also have this, I guess, a sense of building a track. So it's not just segments the same.
Sure. So it's not so
Although
structured.
it depends on what it is too.
So would you think that was perhaps an important skill for new players coming in to keep that I guess it's intensity that comes by, or maybe it's through the sheer panic of only getting 1 or 2 takes.
That's right.
That a different energy comes in the performance. Do you think it's important for them to maybe just have that skill?
I think so, and I think that came about, apart from just doing sessions. Some of the things that I did, one of the best things I ever did in my early years was auditions.
Okay.
And so auditions for bands, etc., touring bands, etc. And what I did was I'd learn the shit out of the tracks. So it didn't matter who I was with or who I was auditioning for, I won the gig.
Right.
So some of the bands were terrible, but I'd really, really learned this because I was hungry, man. I just wanted to do it. So I'd learn the shit out of the tracks, walk in, plug in with my sound right, play it, and blow them out. And I think that's something that young kids have got to kind of get to today too, rather than just rolling up to a rehearsal or rolling up to I was looking at also some of your questions, what are the important things about a session? And it is about presentation. It's about how well you learn the material. Are you warmed up? I remember the first session I did for Les Gock. I was working with Clive Harrison, who's one of the teachers here.
Okay. Yeah.
And Clive recommended me to Les Gock, And that session was a 10 o'clock session down at 301 and Castlereagh Street, 7th floor. You could park outside, or they'd even let you park in the garage, you know, in those days. But I remember getting up at 6 o'clock, changing strings on all my guitars, practicing scales for at least an hour and a half before I got there half an hour early to set my gear up. You know what I did? Chuck, chuck, chuck.
That's fantastic.
Chuck. But it was,
You played the shit out of that.
Played the shit out of it, that's right. And I think that first impression, you know, was worth $1 million. I mean, I still work for Les now.
Right.
So,
Yeah, there's a lesson in that.
it's important that you present well, you have your gear together, you sound great, you look decent.
Yeah, sure.
This is a really important thing. I see kids coming up, you know, rolling up the studio in their shorts and thongs, you know, ready to go to the beach straight afterwards. It's like, that might be a bit more acceptable, but I think the first impressions are really important.
I agree with you. One of the striking things about you, apart from your remarkable musical ability, that goes without saying, is the professionalism that you bring, and the few things that we've done together on TV. You're always 100% prepared, like you just sort of shared with us. Have you always been that way, or is that something that you sort of learnt by the by as you know, was more successful in, you know, getting ahead?
I think I've always been like that. I was speaking to somebody today, and we were talking about, you know, I was talking about a kid that came along to my studio and something happened. And I just thought, wow, I was never like that. Right. I was always on it and had respect and always, you know, I left home when I was 15, so I kind of self-made myself, you know. I didn't have anything. When I left home, I left with a duffel bag with stuff that I had bought. I wasn't allowed to take anything else. So I didn't have a guitar, I didn't have an amplifier. And so I figured that if I'm going to do this and I'm going to make anything of it, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, 15 years old, I knew that I liked playing guitar and I knew I was kind of okay at it, and I was doing gigs and doing weddings and I was teaching and blah, blah, blah. So I figured that, you know, I hated working at the pet store, and I hated painting cranes, you know, those big cranes, and I hated selling paintings door to door pretending I was deaf and dumb. So I had to try and do something with my music. And what I did was, you know, I simply looked at big companies, and I still do it today. And I think, well, what does a big company look like, and how do they function? And you know, usually the lackluster ones die off pretty quickly. You see shops, restaurants, and you see if the service is bad, you don't go back. So it's really simple logic. But yeah, I like to be prepared, and because there's nothing worse than getting on stage or getting to a session and you play like crap, and you sound like crap, and you roll up late and you haven't learned the songs. See, I do music because of the experience I get.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? I love it so much that I want the best out of the experience. And if I go on stage and I'm so untogether, it's not a good experience. And it's not a good experience for the audience. When audience see people loving what they do, they get elated. So I think that professionalism, you know, I mean, you know, people would say I'm lackluster in many areas, you know, but I strive for that because I love it.
That's cool.